We are a proud member of the 143 Podcast Network.
The Cheers to Comics podcast is proudly affiliated with NSCLiveTV.com. That's No Signal Comics. NSCLiveTV.com. Find the Cheers to Comics podcast on channel 34 of NSCLiveTV.com. No Signal Comics. The best in auction action. Well, hello again, slurs. Welcome back to the Cheers to Comics podcast. I am your host, Brian Wayne, and this is Creator Corner. The creator that I cornered this episode is Markisan Naso. In case you didn't read the description, Markisan is known for his work on Voracious from Action Lab Comics. If you're into dinosaurs, this is your fucking book, man. The conversation was great. I can't wait to get into it with you guys. I really can't. I think you're gonna really enjoy this. This guy's he's got something here. He's got something. A bright future ahead of him. And I mean, fucking Voracious is just under, a little over 500 pages around there between the 3 volumes that's out so far. So the guy, he can write a freaking story, man, and make it go. That's for sure. So, before we dive into that conversation, I got to remind you all to support those that support this podcast, and by that I mean, listen to me read an ad. So, Hooked on Comics. Hooked on Comics. I know that, stores are getting ready to slowly start opening up, but that should not keep you from hitting up these auctions, man. These auctions are great, and Hooked on Comics, who's ahead of the game, they know what's up. So join Hooked on Comics on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern and Saturdays 7 p.m. Eastern on NSCLiveTV.com, the Hooked on Comics Facebook group, and the Cheers to Comics Facebook group. You can find them in all those places, maybe even more. They didn't tell me about those places, though. So, once again, Hooked on Comics for all your great auction action, your walls of slabs, and your bin rooms, and what have you, and your goofy hats. Can't forget John's goofy hats. So, Tuesdays, 6, Saturdays, 7, Eastern Time. Alright. Without further ado, let's dive right into a pretty awesome interview with Markisan Naso himself. Markisan Naso, how are ya?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the cast, Brian.
I'm happy to have you on. I am. I've been busy talking with a lot of people, and I'm always fascinated getting work sent to me that I'm not familiar with. Maybe just missed my radar, and Voracious seems like something right up my alley, so I have no problem scheduling this. I actually had the chance to read it. I always wait to read the works that I'm not familiar with as close to the recording session as possible, so I have everything fresh and juicy in my head, and I could really talk about it, man. So, thanks for coming on, Markisan.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Certainly. So I gotta know, I mean, these are, I gotta do the cliche thing and say weird times, but as a comic creator, how is the corona affecting you right now?
It actually doesn't affect me that much, to be honest, because I've been a freelance writer and illustrator for about 7 years. So I'm used to being home, and I do a bunch of podcasts too, so I'm used to talking to people from long distance. So, gotcha. I mean, it actually is kind of nice because my wife is home working, so I get to see her a little bit more. She works long hours usually at the office, so that's kind of been a treat for me. Right I do live in Hawaii, and I moved here just a few months ago, so that's kind of sucks. I can't go out and do some of the things in Hawaii because a lot of great outdoor activities, a lot of water activities, hiking and stuff like that. But we'll get back to it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's good to know that you're not one of the creators out there that have had work paused on them and lost a paycheck. I mean, that is the case, right? You haven't had any work canceled on you?
I have not yet. No, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop because usually the first thing to go would be freelance work. But I've had some clients for a number of years, and the work's been steady so far.
Good. That's good.
How are things going for you?
Oh, I mean, I'm busier than ever. I did definitely have to make some adjusting, having a comic book podcast that revolves around new books and not having new books to talk about. But that opened some avenues for a lot of creators that had now have a couple extra minutes on their hands. So filling that space with some really quality interviews and stuff. So yeah, here we are, one of them.
Awesome.
If anything, it's given me. It's kind of, I guess, it's kind of a nice break in a shitty way of saying it. I don't have to read 30 books this week or last week. But
yeah, I mean, I'm catching up on a lot of books. So I don't read as many comics as I used to, but I definitely have a backlog of books. So it's nice to read whole runs, and I have a lot of digital comics and print comics that I have to get through. So that's kind of been fun.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have got to crack into what I call my apocalypse stack, for the... and I didn't think I'd be cracking into this for years to come, to be honest. But, yeah, it's giving me the opportunity to catch up on a few things. Every once in a while, I stash things to the side for a rainy day, and it's been raining for a few weeks now, it seems. So, yeah, I guess it has its silver linings, I guess. But I would rather just...
I like to save runs sometimes and just read them all at once anyways. But sometimes it gets away from you. Like I have every issue of Monstrous, and I haven't read one issue.
Yeah, see, that's the dangerous thing. You could say, okay, I'm just going to wait, and then eventually that last issue comes, and you're like, all right, well, now's the time. It's done. What are you waiting for? And then you just realize that, oh, well, now it's 30 issues. That's a lot. And or whatever the situation may be. So no, I understand. Doing that backlog reading, it could be dangerous, but at the same time, it's nice to have in these times. So before we dive too much into your work specifically, Voracious, I kind of I like to make sure that the listeners get more of an in-depth scoop of your brain, man. I mean, I admire creators. I really do. I think it takes a really special mind to, for one, want to make a comic, because we all know that there's no money in it and it's hard to do. And at the same time, these ideas that could be, relayed in comics most of the time, or a lot of the times, can't be depicted anywhere else. So the only way we're going to get these versions of these stories and be able to see them in some way is through comics. So I find this medium very special, and even more special the people that create it. So I like to make sure that the creators or the listeners get a real in-depth what's happening in those minds. So I gotta know, I mean, where does the comics start in your history, in your timeline? What part of your life does that start to weave its way in?
When I first started reading comics, you mean?
Yeah.
I'd say, I think I had comics when I was really young, maybe around 5 or 6, but I don't think I really started collecting comics or being serious about it till about 12 years old.
Okay, what made you serious about it?
Well, I was in the mall one day with my mom, actually, and we were walking by a bookstore, and there was a Batman issue in the window, and it was Batman 431. And I saw that, and it's an amazing image by George Pratt, and Batman's hanging upside down from this gnarly tree in a silhouette. And I have to go in here and check this out. And so I picked up the book in the bookstore and read it. And it was written by James Owsley, who goes by Christopher Priest now. And I loved the issue. It was about Batman going on the Himalayas and learning this secret killing technique. Not so he could kill, but just because he needed the knowledge. He wanted to know the knowledge of how to do things. And after that, I was like, Mom, I need to go to a comic shop and find more of these. So she took me to a place called Captain Comics. I grew up in Liverpool, New York, which is a suburb of Syracuse. And then I went to Captain Comics and picked up X-Men. I think Wolverine #1 was out at the time, Daredevil 265, and Ascenti's run on Daredevil. So that's how I got started and never looked back.
Nice, man. So Batman was really essentially your foot in the door as far as taking it seriously.
It was, yeah. And actually last year I got to meet Christopher Priest, and I brought him that issue and told him, thank you, because it was your writing and, of course, the art of Jim Aparo that really got me into comics. Without seeing that and reading that, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing today. I don't think I would have the same outlook on life. I don't think I would have the same hobbies. So, and he was shocked because he hadn't seen that issue in a long time, because it came out in the 80s.
Yeah, man.
And he actually signed it to Jim Owsley, which is pretty cool. So it was a nice moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, these are the things that I love to hear on this show, because I think everybody has their own story when it comes to really falling in love with this medium. I mean, and it's really something that I think you have to be in love with. It's not. I don't see comics as a side chick at all. I really don't. And to have those stories like that, it's an amazing thing. I think comics, once you fall into it, it will change your life in one way or another. Some, more drastic than others, but to say I don't think I'd be where I am now without walking by that mall window and seeing Batman 431 that day, it's a big moment, man.
It really is. I really don't think I would be a writer. I don't think I would have the same brain chemistry without comics, to be honest. I don't think I would have the same outlook or on people or life without comic books. Comic books like X-Men from Chris Claremont, which taught a lot about tolerance and accepting people of other races and cultures. It was a big thing back then. I think you learn lessons that you might not have. My parents are really progressive people, but there's a lot of people out there who might stumble onto that and learn something that they didn't know. And just the way people write stories too, it definitely is something that was implanted in my brain. And when I started writing, not just comics, but any writing, I was influenced by, what I read in the past.
That's awesome, man. And there's no doubt that what we read will eventually influence in some way, shape, or form. But to what level, you may not even really know. But at the same end of the spectrum, life-changing. Gotta love it. So Christopher Priest. Now, what about? So after reading Voracious, I realized, okay, this guy's a funny guy. He knows how to make somebody laugh. I mean, was there any comedic writers that you found to be influential, or was it some comedy outside of comics that influenced your way of writing? Because obviously you do have a knack for comedy; it's a part of you.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest influence comic-wise for me would be Peter David, who wrote the Hulk for 12 years. So yes. If people don't know who Peter David is, they probably do because they're comic people, but he's kind of like the Joss Whedon of comics before Joss Whedon even came out, where he does a lot of really good jokes, but he also has great drama, really good character writer. He can just switch the tone at any time. And so that was something I really appreciated in comics. I just thought that he's such a versatile writer and able to do so much with the characters, and especially the Hulk, who, when I first came in, it's like, oh yeah, he's a big green guy who smashes things. Although actually at the time, I think he was gray when I first started reading him. He was Joe Fixit.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love that run. But yeah, so, but the way he handled humor, especially in the way that the characters talk to each other, I really liked. I think that's something that I guess I didn't really set out to do that when I started writing comics, but it just came out naturally. And I think it comes out in the conversations I have with friends as well. And Peter David was really good at that. He made you feel like you knew those people, that you were friends with them, and that you cared about what happened to them. And so all of those elements, the humor and the drama, I think really stem from Peter David, but a lot of other writers contributed to the way my brain chemistry works along the way, I think. And Ascenti was a really big one for me, even though she wasn't necessarily a humor writer.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome. I mean, what a variety of influences, and it just goes to show that with that with that stem, that spine, as far as your, the way your creativity works, and you being so young into the industry. I mean, you have Voracious, you have three volumes of Voracious. I mean, you have over 500 pages out. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you've really put a lot into Voracious, and then you've done Never Alone after that, right? So tell me a little bit about Never Alone before we really dive into Voracious.
Oh, that's interesting. No one's ever asked me about that little one.
I did my research.
Thanks for finding it.
I did my research.
Well, Never Alone actually came out before Voracious. The way that worked is that my artist Jason Muir and I, we needed to find a colorist, and that was tough for Voracious in the beginning. And we found this guy Andre Tabakaru, and we gave him these pages. He wrote this short 8-page story that's for a horror anthology that came out in it's an Irish anthology. I believe it's called Lightning Strikes or Lightning Strike or something like that. And so I saw the call for that. I was like, oh, this would be cool to do a short little run, and then we could use it as a way to test Andre or any other colorist, to be honest. So we sent it to him, and he killed on it. I just loved the moody lighting that he put into that, and he was just very professional. We had some issues with the colorists who just weren't professional or not turning things in when they should have. So Andre was easy to work with. Any notes we had, he loved getting notes because he wanted to become better. Because he'd only done a few comics. He's from Romania. And so he'd only done a few comics in Romania. And so that's how that came about. But Never Alone, I don't know, just an idea I had for short stories. They say that when you try to break into comics, you're supposed to do really small tales, which I kind of ignored with Voracious, because when I pitched it, it was for a long-form story, and we didn't even know if we were going to actually be able to finish it. But we were, thanks to all the readers who supported us on it, and all the amazing reviews we got. But so yeah, they say to do short stories like 8 pages, do anthologies, do a small mini series or a one shot or something like that. So it's like, well, I'll try to do a couple of those. I only ended up doing that one, but I think it's a pretty good little horror tale. It's up for free on my website. Markisan.com. It's Markisan for anybody that wants to read it. But it's got a little surprise twist ending to it.
Oh, I like it. Well, okay, so now I have to ask. I mean, who influenced you as far as your way of horror writing? I mean, are you a horror movie buff, or I mean, was there another writer out there that just scared the shit out of you in comics one day and said, "I like that"?
Not particularly a horror writer in comics, but I'm a big novel reader. So when I was growing up, I read a lot of Stephen King.
All right.
It was my prime, I guess, probably the one I read the most, Stephen King stuff. And I love horror movies. I actually just did a Metalheads podcast. I'm a host on a podcast called the Metalheads. And we always do top fives whenever we have people on the show that we're interviewing, and we did top 5 favorite horror stories. And so I had some movies in there, and my number 1 actually was Alien.
Dude, okay, we just celebrated Alien Day too as we record this podcast. So no, I fucking love that movie, man. I got my little 5-year-old. Everything's xenomorph to her. She loves the xenomorphs. It's
Yeah, I'm a big sci-fi guy. So if you mix the horror and sci-fi, and even Voracious, my book is a sci-fi book, even though there's a lot of other things going on in it. But yeah, I love that idea of, you're in space. There's not really anywhere to go, especially if you're on a remote planet or on a ship. I just love that concept, and Alien did it perfectly. And the special effects and everything, man, it holds up. They didn't have any CGI back then. Everything was suits and models.
Puppets and yep.
The art of H.R. Giger was one of my all-time favorite artists. So, yeah, it's just perfect. It introduced a great female heroine as well, which you didn't have a lot of back then. So,
oh yeah, and I Yeah, no, you hit every single nail on the head, and there's probably even a couple more, to be honest. But the hammers wore out because it's just the perfect. It's the perfect thing. It's the perfect piece of influence on so many levels. Character design, everything. I'm not going to rename everything you just said, but
scary as hell, man. The face huggers and everything. It's really tense. You don't even see the alien till maybe halfway through.
Yeah.
So it's quite gripping.
Yeah, and like I said, my little 5-year-old. She loves watching it. She puts her hands over her eyes, but she can't wait to get to that point where she gets to put her hands over her eyes, and it's perfect. I wouldn't say by any means it's all ages, but it can be, I guess.
So yeah, I don't think I'm particularly interested. I don't think there's a lot of horror writers that really I look to as influence, but I just like horror. So, when I'm writing comics, hopefully I get to try a lot of different genres over the.
Well, and I don't think there's enough people that attempt horror properly. Or it's just it's a hard thing to do because horror so much to deliver properly. It relies on sound. Which you don't get in a comic, and at the same time, jump scares in a lot of ways, and you don't get jump scares in comics. I don't care how great of an artist you are, I don't think I've ever gone, oh shit, it's.
Well, it depends. Sometimes it's really unsettling, because if you ever read Uzumaki by Junji Ito,
well. Unsettling is a whole different level of horror deliverance that you could bring. That's different, and that's the way that you really have to go to deliver horror via comics. It's like Ice Cream Man. Every panel is unsettling. All of my favorite horror books out there are just unsettling because, like you said, you can't rely on the music and a score driving you through, and essentially a jump scare. But you could definitely rely on gore and like I said, being unsettled. So yeah, I dig it, man. I dig it. So I've got your horror influences coming from essentially outside of comics, and then Peter David sparking the funny, and Christopher Priest really just being the backbone of it all. Now, how does Voracious come about? This is your big breakout book. Is this happening while you're, working as an editor? Because I guess we have to mention that. You do have a bit of a background in comics outside of writing, right? You edited for Warren Ellis and Grant Morrison, to name drop.
Yeah, well, they didn't write those books. They're books from a Sequard organization, so they're kind of like academic books that take a look at Grant Morrison's writing and Warren Ellis's writing. They have done movies as well, where they spotlight Grant Morrison, they spotlight Chris Claremont, Warren Ellis, which is cool. So, I really like doing that. No, I've been an editor since college. So, I used to work for the American Library Association, and I was in charge of different publications for them. And I just moved out of that. I just got tired of working in the office, and I wanted to do more creative things. So that's why I started doing freelance. And how Voracious came about, well, for those who don't know, Voracious is about a chef, travels through time, kills dinosaurs, and serves them at a restaurant in the present. But it's also really a commentary on loss and how you handle loss. It just happens that our lead character, Nate Wilner, he deals with loss by making dinosaur sandwiches, but all of the characters in the book suffer some kind of loss, and their lives, their journeys intersect and parallel each other in it. But the way it started was I had the idea for Voracious a long, long time ago, and I was at a party, and a friend of mine asked me that age-old question: if you could have any superpower, what would it be? So what would you choose, Brian, if I asked you that question?
The ability to manipulate sound.
Sound? Interesting. So you're like Claw, then?
Yeah. More than anything, I just if somebody were talking too much, I just want to be able to not hear it. But, I mean, you could go in all different directions with that. But more than anything, I would use it in the most piddly way possible. And, like, you know, no one wants to be talked to while they're taking a piss in a public bathroom. You're standing at a urinal and someone just tells... I would just zip, and I wouldn't have to hear that.
Okay, that's the first time I've ever heard that. Well, I said that I would want the power to manipulate all time and space because I could go forward in the future and then get the power that you're describing. I could go back in the past, win the lottery, you know. But the first thing I told my friend I would do is I would go back in time and make a dinosaur sandwich. And so we had a good laugh at that, but I wrote it down in a notebook. And, you know, years and years went by, and I went to a convention called Morrison Con, which was focused on the works of Grant Morrison. And it was in Las Vegas. And it was the best convention I've ever been to because it's not like a typical convention where you go there and they promote what's coming up. And this convention was about creativity. So they had different guests there, like Jason Aaron, and they would do panels where they would talk about actually like developing comics, and you would be able to hang out with them and play games with them. And they had an after party where you could like dance with Grant Morrison, and it was awesome. I make my own mead, which is like a honey wine, and I gave it to Jason Aaron right before he debuted on Thor, and I told him, "You've got to put mead in the book." He had never had it before. So I like to think that the reason mead is such a prominent player in that book is because I gave Jason Aaron my mead.
Well, I'm going to have to thank you because I've been reading Jason Aaron's Thor. I mean, Jason Aaron's my top 3 favorite writers of all time. So
yeah, he's awesome.
Let me thank you as a fan.
Well, thanks, Brian. Yeah. No, he's a great guy, you know. He actually, when I was talking about Thor, because I love that character so much, he gave me his card, and he's like, you know, if you want to chat about Thor, and if you want to talk about the history of Thor, I'd love to do that because, you know, I want to try to honor things that happened in the past with the book. So, yeah, that was really cool. I just love that convention so much, and I love the idea that it was just focused around creativity, celebrating creation, and just getting people to be motivated to do something. And they did an anthology book. Some of the attendees that came there, they did an anthology book based on that convention. I did not contribute to it, but the idea behind it was something that really got to me, something that spoke to me. And so I'm like, you know what? Now's a good time to maybe try doing a comic book. I had tried in the past, and I had some artists, and they kind of flaked out on me. And so it's like, I'll try again another time. Plus, you know, work gets in the way when you're working 9 to 5. Sometimes it's hard to do all those creative things. But I was in a place in my life where I needed a little bit more creativity. So that's when I went back into the notebook, and I found that idea. I found some other ideas, and I started working on them. And then I had to find an artist, and that's like a whole other story as well.
Let's talk about that. How the hell did you find Jason Murr? Because this dude is so perfect for this writing style, man. Oftentimes I find myself, you know, I'll get a great premise for a book, and it's done by an indie creative team that essentially, you know, I haven't necessarily heard of, or doesn't have a huge back history to track down. And then, you know, it'd be either a great story it's like the writer took the first artist that said yes, or vice versa. With this is not the case. The art is crispy all the way through. How the hell did you find Jason Murr?
Well, I live in Honolulu right now, but I lived in Chicago for about 20 years, and I moved there from Syracuse, New York. And so when I moved to Chicago, I guess 2000 it was, first thing I got to do, right, Brian, I got to find a comic shop. I need a comic shop so I can get my fix every week. And so I found Graham Cracker Comics, and Jason was working in that shop. And he was like 15 years old, 16 or something. He was pretty young. And so we weren't really friends back then, but he was an artist. And so he wanted to go to school to become an artist. And there was a contest online to write a script based on The Authority, which is like one of my all-time favorite Warren Ellis, Brian Hitch works. And so I won that contest writing a script for The Authority, and I gave the script to Jason because, he's really into comic books. That's what he wants to do. And he drew a few of the pages from the comic book, and, they were all right. He's young. He's just like right before he went to college. So fast forward about 10 years, he goes off to college. I moved closer to the city because I was out in the suburbs when I first found that comic book place. And a friend of ours, the guy who actually ran that shop, who employed Jason, his name was Bobby. He had an idea for a comic book, and he asked me to work on it with another guy. And so we were spitballing ideas, and I think I just had a different take on what the story should be, and we couldn't find common ground on it. So I said, Bobby, you can just take this book's your idea. If you want me to give you suggestions, that's fine. But I don't think 3 writers really works on a book. But in that process, he was still in touch with Jason. And so he would send Jason some ideas to draw concept art for the characters that he was envisioning. And so I saw some of that concept art, and it was really good. It was a lot better than what he had done, when he was 17. So after that fell apart, and then I think Bobby just didn't pursue it, I contacted Jason. I said, hey, I know we haven't talked in a long time, but I saw your art. I know this project's not taken off, but I do have a few other ideas. Do you want to meet up and have lunch, and we can talk about them? So I drove out to see him, and we had lunch and some beers, and I pitched him a few ideas, but the one that we really both wanted to do was Voracious. And so that's how that started. And Jason was also getting tired of doing, regular 9-to-5 job. And so he wanted to do freelance and try to make a go out of it for art, for comics. But the cool thing is that I had those old pages that he did of The Authority that I had saved all those years, and I gave it back to him, and he was just didn't even remember doing them. Wow. And he was shocked. So, and that's the best part. Like, that was the start of us working on the book, but it's also really the start of us being friends. And that's what I really like most about Voracious. Hopefully it comes out. People say it does, that our love for that series really comes out in the book. And it's because Jason and I we would spend time just talking about the story and working on it together. He wasn't just the artist in the book. He was a guy who was an equal partner, creator of the book, and all of the, I came up with all the basic ideas, but Jason threw some stuff in there. We worked on the designs together. We did everything together, and a lot of balances and checks. When he would do art, I would look at him like, this might not work, or when I would send him the script, same thing. So I love working with that guy, and he's just super professional, and his artwork has grown leaps and bounds from that first book. He hates looking at that first volume, but if you look at the first volume compared to the third volume, it's amazing how much he's progressed as an artist. And Andre too, as a colorist, because he was pretty new to it as well. I thought they were both really good. But now I think they're just on another level. And I remember early on when I started working on that book, and there were people who said to me like, the book's really good, the concept's good, but you might need to find like another artist. I'm like, I don't think so. I think Jason's the one for this, the way he does facial expressions, his dedication, how much he loves it, and just the close working relationship we had. And now, he's getting all kinds of work in comics, so. Yeah, I expect him to get stolen away from a project of mine any day now. So,
oh man, do you have? Admittedly, I haven't gone through all 3 volumes of Voracious yet, but I don't know if it has a hard ending at the end of volume 3 or not. But do you have plans to continue on with Voracious, or are you holding Jason to a new project?
Jason and I have been working on a few new projects, actually.
Oh, right on.
So, no, we're not... Voracious has an ending. It was conceived as being 3 volumes. However, I could definitely branch off and do other stories. In fact, in the last issue, in the letters page, I mentioned 2 of the stories that I would like to do and that I've already kind of mapped out.
Oh, right on.
So when you get there, you'll see what I have planned. So I don't know if we'll get back to that. We want to do some other things, try something else. So we've got a fantasy book that we started pitching before coronavirus. Well, here's something that has affected me pretty big in the coronavirus is pitching. Because we pitched a couple companies. We were going to send it out to a whole bunch. But, a lot of companies, we don't know if they're going to survive. Yeah. And I don't think they're really looking at new pitches right now, unless it's like a superstar who comes in and they know they can sell that. But so, we haven't gotten a lot of feedback on it, and we only pitched a couple companies, but, I've asked a couple other companies, and some of the people that were in charge of the submissions are furloughed. So, I think it's a little tougher now to pitch. So I'm kind of holding off on some of these pitches until things pick up again. And hopefully these comic companies will still be around. Some of those mid-level, lower-level comic companies, because, that's what we have to pitch to, Maybe we could get into Image or something like that, but chances are, we probably have to stick with some of the mid-level publishers until we can build up more credit, because that was our first book.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, and that actually leads me right into my next question is, how did you get the Action Lab stamp on Voracious? How did that process go about? Did you pitch it just like you're attempting to do now, or was it funded through Kickstarter and then eventually went Action Lab? How did that process work?
We didn't pitch it to Action Lab right away. What we did, Jason and I, we wanted to do the whole first issue, so we did it and self-printed it, and it was under another name. It was called Cretaceous at the time. Okay. And it was a 48-page #1 issue in black and white, an ash can version of it, but it was better than an ash can. It wasn't like one of those little pamphlets. It was like an actual comic with a glossy cover, and it's big because it has 48 pages. So we printed that up and we sold it at the first C2E2 in Chicago. We only made about 100 copies of it, but we also used it to pitch it to companies. It was in black and white. We didn't have a colorist at the time, but also to get feedback and stuff like that. And I've been friends with Brian Azzarello for a while, and so he was really helpful to me because he looked over the book, and he really liked Jason's artwork, and he gave me some tips on how to streamline the book a little bit and on how to pitch it, because I didn't really know how to pitch. I made like fancy folders and everything. He's like, yeah, you don't need all this stuff. He introduced me to a couple people, and so that was really cool. So we pitched it, and we had a publisher for it, but it just didn't work out with the publisher in the beginning, and they suggested the name Voracious too. They thought we should change the name because people wouldn't really know what Cretaceous is. I'm not sure people really know what Voracious means either, but people are going to get that more than they're going to get Cretaceous. So, it was fine as an amicable split there. We never really signed a contract for it, but we decided that we would go back and retool it because that original ash can is super wordy. There's things that I learned, even though I've read comics all my life, Brian, when you're doing it, it's different. You don't really know everything you need to know until you actually do it. So it was really wordy. Jason wanted to fix some things in the artwork. The staple where it would open on the spread was in the laboratory, which is a lot of dialogue in the final version, but in the original version, it's like almost all dialogue, and that's the first thing you open to.
Oh, gotcha.
And that's a thing that you shouldn't do, and I didn't know that. I didn't realize all that stuff. But I'm glad we did that first one because it helped us. We were learning how to make comics as we did Voracious.
Well, it's a great lesson to teach, for sure, because I know that there's a lot of aspiring, creators on here. So these are all, I'm sure there's a bunch of people taking notes right now. I think you're the first person to actually suggest print an ash can, take it to a convention. So that's a great note.
The thing you got to do, you just got to do the comic, especially that first one. Now when I do pitches, we might do a few pages, then pitch it, see what happens with it. And then if we don't get a publisher, maybe we'd go and self-publish it because we believe in the concept. Like, I don't like to abandon comics because I think all the comics that I'm creating are worth getting out there. But when you're first starting, man, you don't know what's going to happen. And it's the competition's fierce. Oh, so get a comic, complete the comic, do the whole comic, and you'll be proud of it. You know, it'll motivate you to do more, and you'll also see some of the mistakes that you made, because you might just see them yourself, or you give it to somebody else who knows comics, read comics, and they'll look at it and they might point some things out to you. And you have a cool ash can, like Jason hates that. I kind of hate that ash can, but people love it because you can compare it to Voracious #1, and it's a little bit different. There's a couple extra pages in it that weren't in the final version, and you can see how we just progressed and kind of changed and learned just from that one issue. So yeah, I would highly suggest that, you know, like I said earlier in this podcast, you probably want to do short stories, you know, anthologies or a small miniseries. You probably don't want to go the route that I went, that Jason and I went, but anyways, just do it, create it, make it. And, you know, and in these days, you can make a comic book and you can put it on Kickstarter. And if it does well, a publisher might see that and pick it up later. So,
yeah, well, and these days a publisher might not mean anything. It really not. I mean, being self-published might just be a normal thing, because who knows what the distribution market and the direct market's going to be in a couple of weeks. I mean,
oh, man, and there's a lot of great creators who just go the Kickstarter route. You know, yep. Ryan K. Lindsay has had like a bunch of books at different companies, but he puts out a Kickstarter every few months for a new like one shot or hardcover, and those Kickstarters do gangbusters. So, and he owns all the rights to all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's the way to do it too, man. And that's the surefire way to make sure that you own the rights. As long as you know how to, you know, move a Kickstarter, and, you know, I actually suggest you shoot low on your first Kickstarter. Don't try to put out your first book as, you know, a 10,000 copy run or something. You know, maybe a couple hundred. I don't know what the average is to start, but
you would make it to however many people you get for the Kickstarter. Yeah. You know, maybe some extras, but. So, and we've done a couple Kickstarters. We had Action Lab. Well, your original question kind of got off track was, how do we get involved with Action Lab? Well, so we retooled the book and then we pitched it to a few places. And there's a lot more publishers now, but Action Lab was actually my first choice. I don't know if I ever said that before or told them that, but they were my first choice just because I felt like, you know, they were a good, small publisher. They were doing a lot of variety of comic books. I think there's a stigma around them that they do, you know, some kind of cheesecake books, but they have a wide palette of books.
Oh, I mean, everything from Going to the Chapel to Sweetheart. I mean, those are so vastly different books. No, they have an amazing palette to choose from. I love Action Lab.
Good. It's great to hear, man. And yeah, so I like that about them. I felt like their books took chances more so, you know, than say like an Image or something like that. So, yeah, we pitched them, and it wasn't an easy sell. Actually, we had one guy who really championed the book, and that was Dave DeWanch, who does some really, really great comics. If you haven't read Cyrus Perkins and the Haunted Taxi Cab, it's just an awesome book based on a real life event where he almost died.
Writing that down now.
Oh yeah, you got to check that one out. It's great. It's like, I think it's 4 issues. It's really good, and there's a whole backstory to him where he had to go to the hospital, and he came up with the idea while I was in there. And but anyways, I don't remember what his title was at the time. Maybe president of Action Lab. They always rotate. The Action Lab is made up of a bunch of creators who decided they wanted to start a publisher so they could, you know, get their books out there. So they're all creators, and so they kind of rotate, you know, who does what there. So Dave, he might have been in charge of submissions at the time too. You know, he really liked the book, and he actually contacted me and said, you know, I really like the book, but we're kind of split on whether I should publish it because it's just so different. And he's like, would you be willing to do it digitally first? Because Action Lab does that sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, you know, sure, you know, that's something I'd be into. It's my first comic book. I'd like to get it out somehow. But I guess over the course of us like working on more of the issues, and then they read them, it kind of won over the people at Action Lab, and they decided, you know what, we're just going to do this as a regular series. And It was cool. I believe we have the only double-sized #1 issue ever at Action Lab. Like I told you, the original Ashcan was 48 pages. So they're like, well, I can't really do it. Can you get it down? I was like, I can get it down to 36 pages. And they're like, well, we could combine the first issue and the second issue, and it would just be $1 more. Would you want to do that? I'm like, oh, definitely, because you'll get more of the story in the first issue. So we did that, and we were kind of nervous about it because they had never done it. It's our first comic. Nobody knows who we are. And that book sold out. So it was amazing.
Well, people are going to love a bargain. I mean, for $1 more, I get twice the comic. Come on. I'm gonna pick that up every time.
60 pages, that's even more, like a Marvel might put out a double, like 48 pages. And
it'll be $5.99. Yeah.
It'll be, or even $7.99. I've seen some other books.
Yep.
So it was a really good deal. But will people do that if they don't know you? It was the premise strong enough, and apparently it was. So we're very grateful that they were able to do that, because I didn't know how I was going to cut the first issue down, and I didn't have to. I got to do both.
That's awesome, man. I know that, like I said not too long ago, Action Lab has been spawning some amazing stuff. I've created some pretty awesome relationships with some Action Lab creators now that I think about it. I mean, Rylan Grant and David Pepos, and I mean, you guys have a stable of badassery over at Action Lab. I mean, Ringo nominated.
Yeah, a lot of stuff coming up. And, Princeless has always been one that garners awards and stuff like that. But, it's just amazing, just great roster. And David's really cool. I've met him a couple times. Really high energy dude. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had him on a couple of times myself. I just actually had him live on CyberCon just a few days ago. The dude's a blast. Actually, he and Rylan both were on at the same time. They're my boys. The fact is, the Action Lab is producing. I think it's not long before they're going from a mid-level publisher to Dark Horse, Image. I mean, they just because they have that variety in their stable now.
No, it's really about the publishers, the people that are in charge of Action Lab taking it to the next level. Mm-hmm. If they can do that, then I think they have the properties to do that with.
I agree. As I dig further into your background, I mean, you mentioned earlier you have a metal podcast. I mean, and I'm an admirer of fast, heavy, loud music myself. I once again, I haven't got all the way through Voracious, but in what way can we expect metal to influence comics for you? Because we know that horror and comedy has definitely been influences for you, but I mean, does metal play a part in Voracious at all? Is that the next project? What's happening with that? Because I as a metalhead myself, I gotta know.
I would love to do something metal. I actually had 2 comics that I was working on that were very metal, but then some other things came out that were just too similar to it. One of which was Murder Falcon by Dan. That's
actually my favorite comic ever written, or my favorite mini-series of all time ever written in the history of comics. I love Murder Falcon more than anything I've ever read. I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's very 80s metal.
Yep.
So there was that, and there was another book that used like Dante's Inferno or something, and I had a similar idea to that. And so every time I've tried to start these metal comics, something else comes along before I can really get going on it. And I've got plenty of ideas that are metal, and I really want to do them because I like Murder Falcon a lot, but the comics that I see coming out from metal, they're always like they always rely on the cheesy part of metal.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see some like death metal shit. You know what I mean? I want to see some black metal stuff.
But that's the thing is we haven't seen that. Like you said, Murder Falcon, it's actually so much more than cheese when you really get down to it. Yes, Murph is a big cheesy character. the metal avatars, but the actual message itself, yeah, it's real deep, but it's not really metal. It's like, here's a story driven by metal. Metal Shark Bro, fucking love me some Metal Shark Bro, but it's nothing but laughing throughout. I mean, you're gonna laugh twice every single panel. It's metal, but
I read that and I liked it. I enjoyed it, but I can tell they're not really into metal. Like I know Daniel Warren Johnson's really into metal because I've had conversations about metal with him, and he plays guitar, and so he's into metal. And there is a black metal character in the book too, right, which is cool. Yeah, but yeah, I want to see like a serious, like, really metal book.
This is your calling, man. This is your calling. Let's make that happen, because I would feel much more comfortable with it coming from somebody that is as serious about metal as you obviously are. So yeah, man.
I would argue. Some horror books are pretty metal, because that's a big theme in it, and
I think all horror is fucking metal.
And fantasy books, obviously, there's a lot of good fantasy books out there. They could be pretty metal. The newer book that I'm working on, it's got a bit of metal in it for sure.
Right on. Cool.
But you also have to take into consideration your collaborators. Like Jason is not metal at all. He's like he's like a suburban white kid. He's into like pop music and stuff, which is fine. Everybody likes what they like. But so to do metal with him, it doesn't really work, even though I'm like, oh, make this guy more metal or something. Jason doesn't really understand how to do that. So I have to find a way that when I write stories that make him happy, or any of the artists or collaborators that I work with, I want them to feel like they're definitely part of the process. They're co-creating this thing with me. And the way to do that is that you do things that they really love and identify with. And so I got to find like a really metal creator. There are some out there for sure.
Hey, Chuck, well, maybe Brendan Small's floating around the Death Clock IP or something. Maybe he needs somebody writing some Death Clock stories. I don't know. I don't know if you read any of the Death Clock comics. I mean, yeah, they're cheesy and everything, but they're still
metal. Like they know so much. Yep. It's so informed by real life metal and the music and stuff. It's funny, but I feel like that always happens. Every single book, it's got to be funny. Mm-hmm. With metal, and that's fine. Like I still enjoy them, but I just want to see something that's just serious.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean about everything's got to be funny, man. Everything's got to be funny, and I guess I kind of get it, but at the same time, I mean, I'm putting the ball in your court now. This is it.
See, like I said, I mean, the project I'm working on, Jason, definitely has touches of metal in it, and then I have some really like dark black metal type stuff that I'd love to do, but we'll see how it goes.
Right on.
I like to work on one thing at a time usually, just because I got so much else going on. But lately I have been trying to work on more ideas, and there's some people who want to collaborate with me on projects, so I'm trying to increase the amount of comic stuff. But I'm also trying to write prose, and just a lot going on. Even with like I said, the whole pandemic doesn't really affect me that much. I'm pretty much on the same schedule as I was before, so I don't have like the extra time to devote. But we'll get there. I'm pretty excited about some of the new projects.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, I can understand the roadblocks on, branching out and trying to create more than one thing, because it's not easy to make a comic. It's hard to make one comic. And then when you have all these ideas, and then you have a set team that you desire to work with, and the cogs don't necessarily line up as far as storyline and styles. These are the difficulties that creators face on a day-to-day basis. So when a comic does get made, it's got to be the perfect storm. It's all the more reason to respect it.
Yeah, and I've had other artists to work on. One of them was a really metal project, probably the darkest thing I've ever written. But the artist he just turned out to be a disaster. So I had to just kill that project. But yeah, there's a lot of hurdles to overcome, and I like to just put everything I have into a one book. I'm not really. I don't like to spread it out too much. I just want to focus my energies on that one story and be involved in that for a while, and then I would move on to something else. Jason wanted to do, let's do a number of different pitches and pitch that. I'm like, well, you know what? It's a good exercise. I'll try doing that. So we have been doing that a little bit, but yeah, with Voracious, my whole idea with that book was I want to do something I really love, and I want to put everything in the book that I love and make it work. And if it's the last thing, the only thing I ever do, then I'm good with it. That's how I feel about the book.
Cool, man. Well, that actually leads me into one of my last major questions here is what would you like your legacy in this industry to be? You're it's 20 years down the road, 50 years down the road, and people are saying, Markisan Naso, I remember him. He did. What do you want how would you like that sentence to end?
Oh, geez. I don't know if I care. I'm too metal to care about that.
Ah, dude, that's a fucking metal answer. Thank you. Validated.
I just write stories that I love, and if people come to it and can identify with the characters or enjoy those stories, that's fucking awesome. I really appreciate that. I didn't expect that. We get so many letters from people, and people have made action figures of our characters and stuff. I didn't expect any of that. All the reviews we've gotten are pretty amazing. So I didn't expect any of that. I just wanted to do a comic book because I love comics.
That's
and our comic is, you were talking about this at the top of the hour. Some comics, they're definitely comics. They're hard to put into a different genre like movies or TV. Our comic is really hard to do that. Mm-hmm. And I know because Hollywood has Voracious, and I don't think they know how to handle it. And they don't know if they're going to have the budget for it because you haven't read all of them, but just wait to see what happens in that because it's a comic. It's written to be a comic and not anything else. So, I think
you can't have the Iron Man suit and dinosaurs within the same budget. You just can't do that. That's because essentially that's kind of what Voracious is. At least what I grabbed out of the first few chapters. That's a big part of it, where that money's going to go.
Yeah, the thing that I really like with Voracious, and I hope people get it, is that it's a book you can read and enjoy on the surface level, where it's a fun book. There's a lot of cool action in it. There's good humor in it and everything. There's drama and good character moments, but there's a lot of layers to that book. So if you wanted to actually look deeper to see how that unfolds, I think you get more out of it. And there's definitely people who have pointed that out. So yeah, I think a legacy as a writer, if I was going to pick one, is just that, Markisan put his all into the comic books, and it was rewarding every time we picked it up.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, I think that we've got tons and tons to pick from as far as what you've allowed us to, the brain that you've opened up to us at least. But now I gotta I do something towards the end of all of these creator corners, and I do some sort of rapid fire questioning of some sort. Sometimes I'll just do word association. Sometimes I'll just have questions out there that relate to you as the artist in some way, shape, or form. Some of them are kind of white bread questions, and I still find them to be pivotal in directing our way towards the avenue that is your brain. So if you're down to do this, I'd like you to put as little thought into these questions as possible. First thing that comes to mind. Favorite, we'll go. No, just answer it, man. Favorite dinosaur.
Archaeopteryx.
Okay. Favorite metal band.
Wow. Favorite metal band? That is a really hard question. Chemist.
Nice. The last comic you read?
Marauders.
Nice. The best hero?
In comics or any hero?
In comics. Best hero in comics.
Wow, that's really kind of a loaded question. Best hero.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man.
Right on. The villain that you're most attracted to in all of comics. And I don't like verbalizing it as favorite villain because it seems like celebrating evil, but the villain that you're most attracted to.
Hela.
All right. And your favorite single issue of comics of all time. I think we know the answer to this.
Favorite single issue? Like, is it in a series or just like could it be a graphic novel or something?
Just your favorite 20-page comic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's got to be Batman 431.
That's right. Damn right, man. I love it. This gives me plenty to gnaw on. I look forward to... dude, I'll never be able to pronounce the name of that dinosaur. But...
Archaeopteryx.
Archaeopteryx. I didn't think my mouth could work that way. Right on. Yeah, no, this gives me lots to chew on, that's for sure. Markisan, I've had an amazing time talking to you. Before we go, can you let the fans know what to expect out of you? What's Naso 2020 look like?
Well, right now I'm working on a short story for an anthology book. It's prose writing for Outland Entertainment, and they do games and stuff like that. And it's actually a dinosaur barbarian story that I'm writing. So it's pretty fun. They found Voracious, and they asked me to do a dinosaur story. Anything I wanted. So I love Conan because he's the most metal.
Oh, yes.
So I'm doing a dinosaur barbarian story, which is pretty fun. I've never really written prose, but it's something I've kind of wanted to do, and doing a short story is a good way to like flex those muscles and see if I could actually, make it successful. So I'm working on that, and then we have a number of different pitches that hopefully we'll get at a publisher when the world starts back up again. And if you're into metal, definitely check out the Metalheads Podcast. It is the best metal podcast out there. The boys and I, we love metal. We have encyclopedic knowledge of metal. We interview metal bands on there. So Metalheads Podcast, you can go to metalheadspodcast.com. It's on every streaming service, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever. So I think that's what I'm going to be up to. I'm going to be working on some other new comics pretty soon. So I don't know what's coming out this year, but you can follow me at markisan.com or follow me on the social media, and I'll be making announcements as they come out.
That's awesome, man. Well, consider me a fan and a follower on all your platforms. I'm going to be subscribing to the Metalheads Podcast. I'm always looking for something new to check out, and love me some metal. So I'm interested in your takes. That's for sure.
Well, it's great talking to you. Thanks for having me on the cast. You're doing a great job of doing some deep dives into people's stories and their work. So I always love those kind of podcasts.
Well, I appreciate the creators giving me a reason to do that. So thank you, Markisan, and we will be in touch, my friend.
All right. Have a good one.
You as well. Stay safe. Cheers. Boom, another interview in the books. A creator has been cornered. That was Markisan Naso. If you don't know who he was or didn't know who he was going into this, at this point, I'll be damned. I don't know. I don't know what to say if you don't know who he is by now. We really got into it. The guy knows how to, yeah, man, I admire his talents. Let's put it that way. I really admire his talents. I'm going to have links and descriptions and all that stuff at the bottom of the podcast. Get all your information as to where to find him, his social media accounts, and all of that good stuff. So I hope you were able to pull something out of this interview. I know I did, for sure. I always get something awesome out of these creator corners. That's why I don't just have anybody on the podcast. Only the people that I really, really want to have on here, because I know that they're going to give me something, which in turn I can give back to you. So, all right, yeah, no, that's that podcast. That's a podcast. As always, I got to remind you to support this podcast by leaving 5-star reviews on Apple or Podchaser or wherever you leave reviews. I can't stress how important it is to the growth of this podcast. I know based off the amount of downloads I have compared to the amount of reviews I have, 97% of you fuckers aren't leaving reviews, so I'm guilting you here. Make sure you leave an Apple review and a Podchaser review or anywhere else you can leave a review for that matter. Also, become a member of the Slurred Army officially by joining Patreon. Patreon.com/cheers2comics for as little as $1. A single dollar. I know y'all got a bunch of checks for like $1,200. It's like 1,200 months of subscriptions, man. Yeah, that's 100 years. How's that? With your stimulus check, that buys you 100 years as a member of the Slurred Army. I can't think of a better way to spend your money. So, yeah. In all seriousness, becoming a member of the Slurred Army and by joining Patreon, you do get exclusive access to ad-free content and all types of goodies. So, that's it. It's officially been a podcast. I have to remind you, apparently, to wash your hands after you touch the radio and turn it down, or your phone, or whatever the fuck you're listening to this here podcast on. And read responsibly. Cheers, fuckers.
You're listening to Cheers to Comics podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Monty Michael Moore, and this is the Cheers to Comics podcast with Brian Wayne.
In a world of utter randomness, one podcast stood out from the bunch, and it was The Amazing World of Talkin Shiz.
Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. It's just mainly randomness.
And focus is
definitely
not being focused on at all.
No. Our podcast is definitely no theme at all. It's literally random and talk about literally everything and throwing in random jokes at any given time.
We're on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. So go ahead, tune in. New episodes weekly.
And we're international.
International.
Very, very well. So tune in. Follow us on Twitter. See you there.